If you are not being intentional, you are being unintentional. And think about what your default is. If you are being unintentional in your actions, if you're being unintentional in your thoughts, you are leaning into your default. This is the Mental Mettle Podcast, where we explore how to forge mental toughness and resilience in every aspect of life. Welcome, I'm your host, Coach Matt Thomann. I'm an ICF certified professional coach with a background as a teacher, basketball coach, and athletic director. But my journey took a dramatic turn in 2020 when I survived both cancer and a stroke. Those experiences shaped my mission, help others grow stronger in every facet of life. Today, I work with athletes, coaches, educators, and anyone who believes that positive mental health is both achievable and a personal responsibility. This podcast is dedicated to helping listeners develop a positive version of toughness, one rooted in resilience, focus, and growth. Whether you're looking to excel on the field, in the classroom, or in life, this is your space to learn, grow, and take action. Join me on this journey, and together, let's forge your mettle. Coaches, do you dream of guiding mentally tough athletes towards a championship? Kids that are resilient, persistent, and unshaken by setbacks. Well, in today's world, those athletes aren't born. They have to be developed. Many athletes face significant challenges and risk burnout. So how do we foster that mental toughness without overwhelming them? Well, introducing the Ember to Inferno program, Building Mentally Tough Athletes. This series is designed specifically for coaches, offering a deep dive into your own journey of mental toughness and equipping you with practical tools to build confidence and belief in your athletes. Rather than just simply adding more adversity to their life, we focus on creating a strong foundation for mental resilience. You'll learn how to transform a spark of motivation into a blazing fire of toughness, using techniques that address challenges like social media pressures, athletic stress, and trauma. Don't just wish for mentally tough athletes, build them. Join the Ember to Inferno program today and ignite the potential in your athletes. For more information, contact me, Coach Thomann, at Mental Mettle Coaching. Mettle is a person's ability to face adversity in a spirited and resilient manner. It is a great skill to have for athletics and for life, but it is not something we are born with. If you want it, you have to forge your mettle. And if you listen to the Mental Mettle Podcast, you already know that, but not everybody else does yet. So help me out by ordering and wearing some sweet The Mental Mettle Podcast gear. We've got short sleeve tees, long sleeve tees, and some super comfortable hoodies. Order online today and you can have your gear in no time. But the best part is that every order helps support the show and helps me spread the message that mental toughness is a trait that can and should be built. So find the link in the show notes, order your gear, and start showing that you know how to forge your mettle. Welcome back, metalheads. It is Coach Matt Thomann here on the Mental Mettle Podcast, and thankful you're joining me. And today's a solo episode, doing a little bit more of the monthly mettle challenge. If you haven't checked into that, you should go back and check around the first of every month. I've done a podcast talking about some things we can do to improve our happiness, our fulfillment. A lot of these techniques and ideas that are out there, I wanted to try a lot of them. Some of them were really as simple as like gratitude. Then I did one with like a sauna and ice bath and some yoga and some really cool stuff. And today's episode is going to be about, there's going to be a little bit of repeat, but it's don't turn off, because I think this is what's really important. Is the topic today is intention, or what I like to say, intentional positivity, and doing things on purpose, and like actually really leaning into doing things on purpose for our own benefit, for our own happiness, for our own fulfillment, and being very intentional about it, and not just saying this is something I kind of do or whatever. Just and why that's so difficult, and also why it's so important. I'm gonna tell a little bit of a story here, and if you've known some of my story, that's okay. I've started to reach more people, and I think sometimes I have to go back and reiterate why I'm here and what I'm doing, and perhaps I'm going to tell this story in a little different way because it's really interesting when I'm talking about it from the perspective of positive psychology and this idea of intentional positivity that I'm working on. My first introduction to the idea of positive psychology came at a really strange and somewhat fortuitous time. I attended a seminar called the Happiness Advantage or the Orange Frog. If anybody's ever done either of those, it's all from a guy named Sean Acor. Really good stuff. If you ever want to read his book, The Happiness Advantage, I highly recommend it. But I was at his seminar as I was an administrator. My district it was a great idea. I'd sent me and some other administrators to this. It was really cool. And I went to it. I believe it was probably around the very 1st of March. I don't know the exact date, but because it was a couple days. I think it was March 5th or 6th or something like that, 2020. And literally a week before we got shut down for months for COVID. And I can remember being at the seminar, and it was a topic of conversation. Some people were already worried about shaking hands and being around. We didn't know much at the time. There was a little bit of hints that we might get shut down, but nobody really knew. But I can remember that I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the information that came through about the happiness advantage, some of his stuff, Sean Acor's stuff. It's really cool. Check it out. And a lot of the stuff is going to sound like the things that I do and the things that other people with positive psychology and coaches do are going to sound similar in different ways of saying it. But hey, it's all kind of the same. It's all from this positive psychology idea. It's really cool stuff. But it was interesting because that happened right before 2020. And it's almost like on some level, I almost, how do I put this? Almost like if I'd have paid more attention, maybe I could have saved myself some struggles and some problems. But you know how that goes. The first time we hear something, it doesn't always sink in. And looking back, a lot of the ideas that we talked about at Happiness Advantage Orange Frog were great ideas, but I wasn't overly intentional with them. And I didn't stay as part of my daily routine. And as it happened, of course, we had the COVID shutdown. And then I go back to school in late August. That's when I found out I had testicular cancer. And that's when a lot of the negativity started for me. Enough was enough. Things were, the world's going to hell in a handbasket with COVID. Now I've got cancer. There's no sports. My kids aren't getting to play. Both my kids and the kids. I was an athletic director at the time. It was a mess. So many uncontrollables that I was focused on the negative. And it's not a coincidence that this stress, this anxiety, this negativity led me to really struggling with my sleep patterns, and I really didn't sleep at all. I tell people that I can be vulnerable about it now and open up about it, but it was to the point that in, October and November of 2020, when all this was going on, there were nights I would just lay in bed crying instead of sleeping because my anxiety was so high, my worry was so high that I couldn't sleep. I don't sleep easy. It's a struggle for me all the time. And when I was, when in all this negativity, I hardly slept at all, just maybe a couple hours a night. And that was just when the exhaustion finally took over late into the early morning hours. And that was it. And it's not surprising that ended up having some serious health effects on me. And I believe that that's what caused and led to my ischemic stroke. There's a lot of research out there. Of course, when that happens to you, you tend to want to go down a rabbit hole. And there's a lot of research out there that a lack of sleep there's a direct correlation with that and the increase of stroke. So not a it's not an accident, right? It's all connected. And then I had the stroke, found out that, really struggled to speak and write and had to work on that and had months of therapy to do that. And I really struggled even after my stroke. I didn't change enough of the way I was doing things. I kept leaning into what was wrong and the negativity. And now I had even more to be negative about and more to complain about, more to be upset about, more ways to recognize how I wasn't living up and what I wasn't. I was really scared about a lot of things. And I ended up back in the hospital a month later, almost to the day, almost a month later, with PTSD, anxiety attack. And this was when it was suggested to me, highly suggested to me, that I go get some therapy. And, enough was enough. And we could see the writing on the wall that this wasn't going to go well for me if I didn't do something. So I did go get some therapy, and I didn't know what to expect, having not done any therapy at all. This woman, I've had her on my show. If you want to check out that episode, it was all the way back, episode 25 with Tammy Lott. We really talk about the impact she had on my life and the kind of therapy she does based off of positive psychology. And it's really interesting because that was I started that in January of 2026, probably February, somewhere in there. Almost a year later from my first taste of positive psychology, and now I'm knee deep in it, and it's not theoretical for me now. This is something that I had to have to kind of move forward. And it's just an interesting story on how I think that just how life works, how this master plan God weaves for us, and how, yeah, it's such an interesting way to look at it for me on these ideas that I'd never heard of before, were suddenly came from something right before I needed it, and to something an idea that I needed to pretty much change my life, if not save it. It's just so useful and so interesting on how things like that go. And it's fun to think about and look back at it now. But this idea of intentional positivity all comes from this positive psychology. And I'm going to get into a lot of the things on how you have to be intentional to change this, because what I learned was, and I talk about this on the show all the time, and if you ever hear me speak or work, if you do anything with me, you're going to hear me talk about neuroplasticity and how our brains are very efficient, and that they work in a way that they think is best to get things done. The problem is it's not always what's best for us, and our brains they may be working efficiently, but it might be efficiently in the wrong direction. And we have to step in and change that. And through the idea of neuroplasticity, I learned about neuroplasticity for a couple ways. One, because when they tell you that you've had a stroke, those cells in your brain don't come back. They are dead. And my stroke had hit in the speech centers, which is why I couldn't speak and why I couldn't write. And there was nothing I could do about that. There was no amount of hard work in a day that was going to make a difference. I had to have time for neurons, and that's what neuroplasticity is, neurons to move around that dead spot to reconnect some stuff. Now, I can do some things on purpose, some speech therapy, some work to make that speed up, but biology is biology, and it was just going to take that kind of time. And I learned about neuroplasticity and how that was going to help me learn how to write again. But Tammy in my sessions taught me that neuroplasticity is not just for learning a lost skill after an injury. It's learning a new skill on the way we think and the way we act and what we want to do. And that's what we started doing. And to me, as a guy with a science degree that taught biology, to understand that this is a biological concept that can be seen in our brains, in our brain scans, and that you can change different parts of your brain lighting up based off of negativity and positivity. And to know that there was a way to do that, that fired me up, to know that I could change the way I handled adversity, the way I looked at negativity, the way I saw the world, all by doing things intentionally on purpose to get better. Because I was all about intention. I've always been about getting things done. Yeah, I'll put in the work if I know the work yields something. I am not about putting in work on something that's not going to do something. But when I know that it's going to get somewhere and I'm going to gain something, being intentional is huge to me. And to know that I could start working on intentional positivity meant a lot to me. And the reason why this is so important is because we, as in humans, for the most part, operate our operating system, our default system is to live in a negativity bias. And this is shown in so many ways. First of all, it makes sense. So the negativity bias, when we look for negative things, it can help us stay alive, right? That's the idea. The negativity bias is looking for threats, looking for problems so that we avoid those problems so we can move forward. It's a natural thing for us, it's to help us survive, right? And all the psychology and all the research shows this. And so much so that like the negative events in our life are remembered more vividly. The most vivid moments in our life and our most vivid memories are usually negative events. We catalog those because we're trying to avoid those in the future. Your athlete probably spends hours working on the specific skill set they need for their sport. And they probably spend hours in the weight room building their body. But how much time do they spend intentionally training their mind? Well, building mindset is the key to bridging the gap between the skills that we see and game execution. Well, Mental Mettle Coaching provides individual programs that can help your athlete develop this third and crucial skill set. Coaches, do you dream of guiding mentally tough athletes towards a championship? Kids that are resilient, persistent, and unshaken by setbacks. Well, in today's world, those athletes aren't born. They have to be developed. Many athletes face significant challenges and risk burnout. So how do we foster that mental toughness without overwhelming them? Well, introducing the Ember to Inferno program, Building Mentally Tough Athletes. This series is designed specifically for coaches, offering a deep dive into your own journey of mental toughness and equipping you with practical tools to build confidence and belief in your athletes. Rather than just simply adding more adversity to their life, we focus on creating a strong foundation for mental resilience. You'll learn how to transform a spark of motivation into a blazing fire of toughness, using techniques that address challenges like social media pressures, athletic stress, and trauma. Don't just wish for mentally tough athletes, build them. Join the Ember to Inferno program today and ignite the potential in your athletes. For more information, contact me, Coach Thomann, at Mental Mettle Coaching. Right, so they don't happen. And our negative voice, whenever I work a lot on internal voice and inner voice with athletes, coaches, stuff like this. And when we talk about the difference between a negative voice and a positive voice, and we might get into a little bit here on it, but the first thing we start identifying it, and almost everybody, their negative voice is much more vivid, much more recognizable, and more prominent than their positive voice. It's there. We have it. It's kind of like, it's the default, and it's something that is, it's more natural for us. And then, of course, the negativity bias is, because that's kind of everybody's default, the social conditioning makes it even more. It creates that negative groove in our brain. Like the media, fear sells. When you watch the news, we know this. We know that, like, it's all about the fear. It's all about the negativity, and nobody watches. It's cool that, you get the feel good story at the last 2 minutes of the news, but it's not what it's about. It's all about the negativity. So we lean into it on social media, on TV, on everything. We lean into that negativity, and it, again, so the idea of neuroplasticity, about how you can change the way you think, but the thing is, neuroplasticity, there's no on-off switch. So when you lean into the negativity, you get better at that. Again, those neurons get so well defined, and you start looking for negative, you start feeling negative, you start searching for negative. You're not doing it on purpose, but you get to the point that you think the world is all negative. And because that's what you're looking for. It's the red car theory. Like, how many red cars did you see on the way to work today? And you're like, I don't know, but I ask you that, and you'll see it on the way home. It's confirmation bias. You get confirmation bias about negativity, and we look for it. And it's not just biology. It's not just social conditioning. We can get biblical application of this, or biblical examples of this. Jesus knew this about us. He would say things to us. A lot of this is really cool. So I'll tell you the verse in a minute, but last episode, if you didn't catch the episode with Greg Tonigal, he's a basketball coach, very highly successful basketball coach at Indiana Wesleyan University. And he talked about this, about how we lean into fear, and how Jesus talked a lot about fear, and how coaches typically coach from a place of fear, and how he got away from that. And the second he got away from coaching in fear to an idea of coaching with fearlessness, he immediately started winning national championships. And how that switch to positivity made so much a difference. But he's the one that kind of mentioned this to me, about how Jesus talked about so much about fear. In Matthew 6:34, Jesus said, "Therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own." He knew that was our default, that we're going to worry. We're going to be fearful. We're going to worry about the negatives. And Paul talking to the Philippians, talking to them, and said, do everything without complaining and arguing. And he said that because they were complaining and arguing. And I love that verse, because Paul wrote that verse from prison. And if a guy from prison, in a Roman prison, things were not going well for Paul when he was writing this. But if he can write that, then we know that it's a choice. And happiness is a choice. And you can start to work on it. And positivity is a choice, but doesn't happen without intentional positivity. And that's what we need to work on. And that's what Paul would be a great example of that. Paul spent his days reading, writing, and praying, and being positive about his situation, even though there was very little positive about his situation. And the thing about this negative positive idea, and I get it, like, a lot of people, a lot of coaches, a lot of people, I go around and I do my presentations with coaches, and I talk about the negative voice and the positive voice. And to this day, I get almost every time I speak, I have somebody want to argue with me and talk about it, and just want to talk about how, well, it's this negative voice that is this motivator that gets us forward, that helps us get somewhere. It gets us up off the couch, and it motivates my players to get moving forward. And it can. That negative voice, again, it's about survival. It can move us forward and it can motivate us. You can get that fear, that fight or flight thing going. But the thing about it is, I like to say that the negative voice or coaching and negativity is a short-term motivator with long-term consequences. Negativity helps us survive, but it does not help us thrive. I need you to make sure you caught that. Negativity is designed to help us survive, but is not there to help us thrive. Okay? And that's a biblical thing too, right? Jesus knew that we were going to be worried about this, but he has bigger plans for us than tomorrow or what's going on in the world. He has bigger plans for us. He wants us to thrive. You have to do that with positivity and moving forward. Okay. And it's real clear. There's a lot of research when we talk about the negativity and the voice that we have, and that most of us have that negative voice. It's not, we think maybe it's helpful and it can help us survive, but when we really start to analyze it, we know that it's not right. A lot of things, because we know it's not honest. A lot of the ways that we talk to ourselves and our worries, they're well overdone. Our worries and our fears and our negative voice, they're just not honest. They're not rooted in probability. Maybe you could be worried about something that might happen, but it's a might, and it's probably low chance. And they're just overly critical and dishonest. And again, as we start to practice that negative voice and the negative mindset, it gets harsher and louder. It turns up the volume. Make sure it's trying to get us our attention because it thinks that's what's better. Because that, again, that's the way our brain thinks we want to work. And we start going that way because, again, if you're not being intentional, you're leaning into the unintentional. If you're not being intentional with positivity, you're probably getting better at the negativity. Okay. And the thing is, it's not just, even though we think it helps us survive, and it can, it's doing too much of the negativity. There's a lot of long-term damage, right? So there's a lot of research out there that shows the idea of rumination. When rumination is when we sit at home or at night worrying about all the mistakes we made, all the problems we've got, and things we did wrong, and blaming ourselves. There's a strong link, a lot of research, to that seemingly minor thing and harmless thing is kind of like the precursor to all sorts of mental health problems. It'll start with anxiety, it'll turn into depression, and who knows what. This is hard. I don't want to get too dark here, but I think a lot of times when I talk, I'm a guy who played sports, and when I was talking about how some coaches reach out to me and say, well, this is the way I was coached and the way it should be coached, and it's always a guy that's saying that, because a lot of times the guys were coached like that, and it was very negative, in your face, fight or flight type coaching, fear coaching, things like that. And some of them will still back it up and still be a proponent of it and say, well, I was coached this way and I turned out okay. And then they start coaching like that, and it just perpetuates. And a lot of times we say, and they might give a military example, like, well, this is how they do it in the military. Like, this is how a drill sergeant would do it, and they get things done. And I guess if you want to say that those things are on the same level, but they're not, we know, well known, that soldiers coming home after being in these high stress, high intensity environments come home with a lot of mental health issues, right? The epidemic with suicide rates for our veterans coming back is unacceptably high. And we want to look at the way they are trained. And sometimes we train like that because it is life or death. They're protecting the nation. And I'm not saying you can't do that in the military, but at least we know that they have this job that is so it is life or death. They are in life or death situations, and sometimes training that way will help them get through that. But let's not act like it doesn't have effect on them, because it does. And there's a lot of research being done on that. Martin Seligman, the father of positive psychology, the guy, and I'll talk about him later, and I talk about a lot of these stuff. He works with some military organizations, I know he's done a lot of stuff with the Navy, and they're trying to use some of this neuroplasticity to stop PTSD before it starts. So they're aware that it's a problem in the way that soldiers are trained and what they go through and what they come back to. And they're aware of this problem, and they're trying to adjust it. So to know that, but then to say this is how we should coach athletes I don't know. There's no good way to do it. It's not acceptable. And I think that that's what we need to do moving forward. It is a damaging and dangerous way to coach people. And I think that I know too much. I know enough working with athletes that the voice of coaches early on can become that negative voice of the athlete. Trust me, because I do a lot of stuff working with individual athletes on their voice. And a lot of times it comes from a coach, from a young coach, and they're trying to get past that. And I don't think that's worth it. Plus, you can do it better positive. You can win games positively, and we're going to get into that. But the other thing is, it's not as effective as we think it is. There are some individuals that will respond positively to negative coaching or negative thoughts. And I say positive in the sense that they might win a game, right? Their fight or flight is fight, but they go win the game. But again, is that really worth it? But there's just as many that don't react the right way. There's a lot of research that it causes, it's not just fight, flight, but it's also freeze. And that's what we notice here too. There's some research here. This is from Psychology Today, that the problem with negative self-talk is that it typically does not reflect reality. So it can convince people wrongly that they are not only good enough, but they can never get better, paralyzing them to self-absorption and inaction. This is that freeze. You start telling yourself you're not good enough times, and you'll believe it, and then you won't do anything, and you're just... Parents, is your athlete ready for the upcoming sports season? They might have the strength, the speed, and the skills, but without confidence, they can still struggle when the game is online. Skill and strength are great, they're necessary, but they're not used to their full potential without the right mentality. Confidence is key. It's the key to unlocking that full potential. And at Mental Mettle Coaching, I offer personalized sessions designed to build the confidence your athlete needs for a successful season. My proven techniques empower them to perform under pressure, both on the field and in life. Don't let a lack of confidence hold them back. Book a free session today and discover the power of confidence. Visit the website, get started on the journey to a more confident, successful athlete with Mental Mettle Coaching. Stuck there. Martin Seligman talked about this. One of his famous studies on negativity was on learned helplessness. I've talked about it on this podcast before, but it's worth repeating. And it's so sad, because what he did, he took a group of puppies, dogs, put them in different boxes, and the boxes they had electric shocks in them. Okay. And the one group of dogs had this lever they could push to turn the shock off. Right. So the dogs were learning, hey, I can do something about my situation. I can do something intentional to stop this pain. Okay. And then another group of dogs were put in a box that had the shock, but had no way to get out of it. And they whimpered and whined and tried to do stuff. But once they eventually found out that there was nothing they could do, they just sit there and took it. Now, this wasn't like killing them shocking, but it hurt. Right. And then of course he had a control group, but then he took all the dogs and put them in different boxes, this time with a different way to get out. All they had to do was jump over this barrier whenever the electricity came in. And the dogs that had been trained on a lever that when the shock came, they could press the lever to turn it off, believed that there was something they could do to get out of their pain. And so they would look for it, and eventually they would figure out they could just jump over the barrier. No big deal. The dogs that had never found a way to get out of their pain and their hurt and this electricity never even tried to jump over a barrier. They just laid down, cowered, and whined. And Seligman talks about this being learned helplessness. And it's just so sad because we see it in people. They lean into negativity so much and they lean into pain so much that they never even try to get out of that pain or get out of what's hurting them or the problems that they're having. They never do anything on purpose to move forward. And that leads into the intentional positivity. Like, that's the answer to your fulfillment, for your happiness, for moving forward. It's intentional positivity. It's doing things on purpose, okay, to help us. And there's so many things we can do. There's another piece of research by Seligman. I love this one. And he talks about what moves the needle for positivity or for happiness. And he acknowledges that our happiness is about 50-50, as in 50% of it is genetic. So, and that's fair. Like, it's a lot of our happiness is genetic, and it is just something we're born with, we struggle with, whatever. And there's some people are more genetically happy than others. It's a real thing, but we can't do anything about that. So we're going to skip that. The other 50% is about what changes, what moves the needle, what changes happiness, or what leans into it. And he found that of that 50% of it, 40% of it was intentional activities, and only 10% of it was circumstance. Meaning that the things we tend to think that our happiness is what will happen to us. Oh, we think that we hope that if we win the lottery, we'll be happy, or if these bad things don't happen to me, I'll be happy. And time after time, research after research shows us that's not the case. Really, really miserable people win the lottery that are poor, that become very miserable rich people. It doesn't move the needle. It doesn't change anything. And they've done research about quadriplegics and people that were in very terrible auto accidents, and found that, yeah, they're a little less happy than before because now they can't use their arms and legs, but it really didn't change much. If they were happy before, they kind of stayed happy. And if they were miserable before, they kind of stayed miserable. It doesn't move. The only thing that changes our happiness is doing things on purpose, intentional positivity. And what I love about it, and I did this, I was recently asked to come and speak at a church and actually do the sermon, which I'd never done before, Mount Gilead, where my parents go to church, and they had asked me down and asked me to do the sermon, which was fun, but it was also a little bit of nerve-wracking, I'll be honest, to be able to do that. But I leaned into a verse there, because how do I talk about some of these scientific concepts that I reconcile, that I see in a lot of my faith, right? But I don't know that everybody believes that, but the same way that I would. But I leaned into Romans 12:2. Paul wrote that, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And that verse to me screamed about everything I've said so far. The pattern of this world is negativity, and the way that genetically, we were just brought up in that survival instinct, and just, again, that negative thought process. But Paul talked about being transformed by the renewing of your mind. To me, transformation, renewing of your mind, that's positive psychology. That's using positive psychology. That's using neuroplasticity to change our brains and think about things differently. Now, from Paul's perspective, from the Christian perspective, that means getting in the Word and reading. I was at a Bible study this morning. We talked about how all of us kind of agreed the more that I read and the more I pray, the more I handle things better. And whenever I get away from that, I don't handle things as well. Like, what you fill your brain up with and fill your time with comes out, and it starts to affect our brain and our mind and our actions. And it's really important to do that. So I just love that connection there, that Romans 12:2, when Paul was talking about, because he's talking about transforming your mind and doing things intentionally. Like, you don't accidentally do this. You have to do things on purpose. So leads me all that background into what I'm going to do in September, and what is my purposeful, intentional positivity that I'm going to do in September. And again, some of this is going to be a little bit of repeat, but I think that's okay, because I think that even if it's talking about, if I'm doing something in September that I did all the way back in January or February or something like that, over time our intention slips. Like, something I was doing, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to really get back in the Word and reading the Bible and praying more that I did fantastic in February. And I've noticed it's slowed a little, just about every month since then. I've gotten a little bit less. So I need to get back to that. So my idea is being very intentional. That's my goal today, or this month, is intentional positivity. Another one I'm going to lean back into is do some fasting. That's a very biblical perspective. That's another good episode that I talked about. But I'm going to start the month of September with some pretty serious fasting for a few days. And some of that's a health thing. Some of that is a biblical thing, and knowing that I gain more focus if I'm praying and fasting. And that is something that the Bible suggests that we should do. And so I'm doing that. I'm going to lean into the gratitude a little bit more, and kind of gotten away from, I preach all the time about doing the 3 good things and talking with somebody and writing 3 good things that happen every day. And I had done that, did it great. And then I get so busy over the summers, things were going on. My business is growing, things are going crazy, and I'm slipping, and I want to be very intentional. And another thing that I'm going to be very intentional with, when I really talk about the intentional positivity in the month of September, I'm going to be very intentional about sending texts to people I know, very positive texts, and helping people. Like, when somebody comes on my brain, I'm going to send them a positive text, a little bit of affirmation, a little bit of just helping them along, push them along, a little bit of motivation. And then also do the same with some actions. Find some ways to help people and be very intentional about it. And then the thing I'm going to do about all of that is I'm going to journal about these and write about these, be very intentional about what I'm doing in the morning, what I plan to do, and what I'm doing each night, what I did, and being very intentional. I'm going to go overboard on the intentional stuff here, on the Bible, leaning into my faith, fasting, 3 good things, and the positive texts and actions, and just be as positive as I can and do these things just intentionally and positive as much as I can in the month of September. And I'm going to encourage you to do the same. What do you want to be intentional about in September? I'm doing several things, but find something. It could be any one of the things that I've done over the last, this monthly metal challenge. Find something and be intentional about. Could be your exercise, could be your faith, could be your conversations with others, could be a relationship. There's so many different exercises you could do that if you look up stuff from Martin Seligman, Intentional Activities, or look up Sean Acor on the Happiness Advantage, they will happily tell you why these things are an advantage and why you should do them, when they can help you. But then they're also going to give you these tools. A lot of them are some of the stuff that I'm doing here. They're going to give you tools on how to do that and practice that intention. And hiring a coach would be a good one. Coaches are all about intention and helping you move forward and giving you a way to do that, and then also giving you that accountability. And accountability and intention go a long way together. They're kind of bedfellows there, that like you can have intention, but it's hard to get away from it. It's easy to get away from that intention if you don't have accountability. So this is going to be something I didn't have Dana, my wife. Sometimes she jumps on here with me for this episode. We didn't get on, but I'm going to ask her to be very intentional about stuff and some intentional positivity. And she's already good about that, but she will agree with me that, hey, this is something I want to lean into a little bit more. So she's going to be my accountability partner, as she usually is, because she's awesome. So I want you to think about what you want to be intentional about in the month of September. And just remember, if you are not being intentional, you are being unintentional. And think about what your default is. If you are being unintentional in your actions, if you're being unintentional in your thoughts, then you are leaning into your default. And that's not to say that we're terrible people, but we have a negative bias and a negative default. And we need to be intentional, okay? And that's a biblical thing as well. Again, Paul, Jesus, they both talked about what not to do because they knew that was our default. You have to get away from these default systems that we have. If we want to change, we have to be intentional with our positivity to start that neuroplasticity, start changing it. Okay. How long? It takes a bit. I'm telling you to do it September, but as you do it in September, start to notice the changes and recognize the changes and give yourself the credit for doing it. That'll help you do this. My growth in positivity is it's this. I would tell you that the trend line is up, but it's not a straight line up. There's times it gets better and it comes down, but overall it's a trend line up. So that's what we're looking for, is that trend line up. Be intentional with your positivity, have some accountability, and then constantly evaluate where you are and how you can get forward, and you will do that. You'll get that trend line up, and it's a great thing to have, to be able to do that, because then that allows you to do so much more, to help others and do things and grow in your faith and grow in your relationships and grow in your job and help you be a better influence on all those around you. And that's what we want. That's what we want to do. And that's what I'm looking for. And that's what I'm hoping for. And if you're listening to this as a coach, definitely going to help you, because I will talk at length about the power a coach has in the life and lives of others. And a lot of times coaches come to me and want to learn these tools so they can help their athletes. And I'm telling them, I need you to do this first. Be intentional with your own positivity in your own life and build these things in your own life, and you can really help others more. So just intentional positivity. That's my plan. That's my goal. That's what I'm going to do in the month of September. If you have any questions for me, all my information is in the show notes. Shoot me an email. Let me know you're doing this, and let me know to help. Like, I'm more than happy to help. You don't have to hire me as a coach up for all this. I'm happy to chat with you and help you along in this journey and be a part of that. So many people have helped me in my journey, and I love helping others. So reach out to me, coachthomann@gmail.com, and see if I can help. And I would absolutely love to hear from you, or shoot me a note on Facebook. However, I'd love to hear from you. So it's been a good conversation. I hope this helps. I hope this is something that you can seriously think about doing. And I hope you do. So, but that's all the time I have for now. This is Coach Thomann. This is the Mental Mettle Podcast. And always remember to forge your metal. Thanks for listening to the Mental Mettle Podcast. Don't forget to tune in every week for more insights and strategies to help you forge mental toughness and resilience. This podcast is brought to you by Mental Mettle Coaching, where we are driven by a passion for sharing knowledge and experience that empowers others to play, live, and grow with confidence. Our mission is to instill a resilient and spirited mindset in our clients, enabling them to confidently face adversity and actively seek new challenges for personal growth. At Mental Mettle Coaching, we offer individual coaching, group coaching, and professional development for schools and businesses. Whether you're an athlete, educator, or professional, we're here to help you unlock your potential and thrive in every area of life. Until next time, keep growing, stay resilient, and always remember to forge your metal.